Ooh. Okay, so we're going to be talking about addiction. I feel like, okay, I'm going to try to keep this moving forward if we can. Um, we're going to move forward by going backwards. The last several years, the last 2 to 2.5 years have been a long, rough, emotional journey. And I think that here on the channel, if you've been around, I have mentioned stuff like here and there about dealing with things and about stuff that's going on with my family and being like, but that's not my story to tell. And I'm about to tell that story in a very brief way without any kind of deep, unnecessary details. Because actually, when I started to, I think, heal and process a couple of years ago, and actually it was probably more like 3 years ago, when I started to heal and process, I started to realize that that story is my story, and I have every right to share my story and to live my truth. And as long as I am not maliciously calling out people or going after them or sharing something unnecessary to my story just to hurt somebody else, then I have every right to, like I said, to live my truth and to share my story. And so it's been kind of a weird situation where I'll be talking to you guys and I'll be like, but that's not really my place. And I think that but it's a vital part, and it might be even why I stopped using YouTube consistently, because there was so much going on, and I felt like, how do I use this tool that I've always used with such transparency and then not be transparent? I kind of lost the value of it for me. So we're going to talk about several things. One, my little brother. Some of you guys have met him here. Do you hear the cats? They're not happy. My little brother, who has been on the channel a couple of times, has been using drugs for many years. He is almost 30. He's going to be 30 this year, and he has been using some sort of drug for at least 15 years. But over the last 10 years, and probably actually a little bit longer than that, but I know for a fact the last 10 years, and I am going to only kind of give you facts that I have, because when you're dealing with an addict, you can't really use their facts because they tend to lie. For the last 10 years, he has been basically a heroin addict. That does not mean he limited himself to heroin. He will use any pill in excess at any time, all day and all night. And he drinks excessively. But what a lot of people don't realize about, I think a lot of people have this idea of when you are a junkie or a heroin addict or a drug addict or an alcoholic, you fall down wasted, you can't function, you're overdosing left and right, and that's not actually true. Though arguably he's been very close to ODing, and I have witnessed with my own self some horribly dangerous situations. That's not actually true, and basically what has happened over the last couple of years was that I have addiction in my family, a lot of addiction. And my grandparents have been, they are all passed away now, but they were alcoholics. There is drinking in my family that I think I have mentioned here and there that makes me extremely uncomfortable. I grew up with a lot of, my parent, who I reference as an alcoholic, does not like that word. It means something very different to them, because their father was that stereotypical, insane, extremely physically violent alcoholic. But there's that person, and then there's the person who drinks all the time and who does go too far quite often, and who can be verbally and emotionally just terrifying and horrifying to be near. And then they're very sorry, and they function in a different way, and they heal those wounds. But you can only say you're sorry so many times before that behavior is expected. And it's hard to take that apology, because yeah, you're sorry today, but tonight you'll be drinking and do it again. And while physical violence was not a regular occurrence in my home, it did occur, and emotional abuse and mental abuse was a regular thing. And it took me a very long time to rectify, like, you're like, oh, what right do I have to be like upset? Or, people have had so much worse things happen, but that doesn't negate what happened in my home. So that being said, my little brother and I have always had a very, very close but strange relationship. We grew up in two very different homes, like, even though we were in the same home. He's 6 years younger than me. He's 8 years younger than my older sister. So my older sister and I are about 23 months apart, and we had a very similar time frame of growing up. She had a very different relationship with my parents, because she, I guess, being the older one, was more about confrontation. I think that being the second one, I learned a lot of how to avoid, and you wind up being like the yes person, and you learn quickly how to sidestep problems, and unfortunately how to like deflect them. And what I think that I dealt with was a lot of guilt. Like, I felt like I should be doing more to protect my sister, and I should be doing more to like interfere with what was going on. And at the same time, even when it's not you directly receiving that behavior, when you witness somebody else receive it, you understand what can happen to you if you step out of line. And then as she got older, I kind of wound up in that role of like receiving it. But then my brother was 6 years behind us, and so kind of alone. And he did start doing drugs earlier on. So even when I would try to connect with him to like get through that, it was a really strange situation. And, one of the things about it is you have to realize what's being done to you, and nobody can, like I said, I felt so guilty, and I felt like, but other people have had it worse. And it wasn't until I was willing to admit that things bothered me, and that they got in my head, and that I still deal with the fallout of that you can't even fix it until you're willing to take it out and look at it and do the hard work or whatever. So a couple of years ago, probably about 3 years ago, I realized a lot, and I had a lot of connections happen, and I just knew that there were certain behaviors I was not willing to continue. It was about breaking the cycle and wanting to just stop it. And I think also there's a lot of like, when you are surrounded with people who use, because when you have addiction in your family, you tend to be an addict. Food is my vice. And you also tend to find those relationships. This is what love feels like to me, so I recognize it as love. And so if you love me the right way, it doesn't feel good or comfortable. It feels scary and alien. If I can find somebody who can replicate what I know, I can then feel more comfortable. I know how to deal with you because you're an addict. I know not to trust you. I know not to, those kind of things. So I have had, in every major relationship of mine up until my wife, I have had an addict. So those were some really horrible relationships in their own right. But I always had trouble, like you, in your mind, you go, this is wrong. This should not be happening. And I don't deserve it. But living out that truth is a very different thing. So I would always feel really guilty. Like, what if I'm the last person who loves this person and can help them get clean? What if I cut them off too early? What if I trigger something bad happening? What if, like, that kind of thing. And then what I needed to learn was that actually boundaries are not about the addict. They are not about punishment. They're not about ultimatums. They're not. Like, if you're saying you better get clean or you can't be with me, and you're doing it to make them clean, bad. But if you're doing it for you, perfectly okay. So what I realized was that, like, and I have talked about this on the channel, but like standards, it was like I just looked around my life and I was like, I have a set of standards. I have a set of standards for me. I have a set of standards for my wife. I have a set of standards for my children. Like, I have standards that I want to live by to be the best me as possible. And those standards are boundaries. They set boundaries. Like, it's just two ways of saying it. Like, I don't want heroin or needles in my house. And if I can't trust you to not shoot up in my bathroom, then you can't use my bathroom. Period. And I don't need a positive drug test, and I don't need to find the needle every single time you use the bathroom. I know that that's where you're at. I have the right of saying no. And that's just an example straight only with my brother, but I'm saying, like, across the board, I found that, like, I was letting things that I did not agree with and I didn't feel comfortable with and I didn't want in my life out of this weird and twisted version of, like, guilt and loyalty. And I started to make changes. And when you make changes, the people around you get very uncomfortable. They will call you names. They will say ugly things. They will remind you of all the times that you screwed up. If you say, I don't want drinking in my house, they'll remind you of all the times you were drunk. If you say, I don't want drugs in my house, they'll remind you of all the times you might have done drugs. If you say, I don't want, whatever it is, they're going to call you out. But you know what? You have the right to change. You have the right to get better. You have the right to want more. And so it doesn't matter what past mistakes are, and it's not about changing them or making them do something. It's about how you want to live your life. And so I realized that for me, I just wanted something different. And there were a lot of things that led up to it, and there were a lot of, like, examples and that's the part where I feel like that's, like, getting unnecessarily brutal by calling out certain behavior and certain things. But I lived a lot of trauma attempting to set the standards and boundaries. And, I like I said, I knew what my brother was doing. I knew where he was at. And yet nobody wanted to believe me because, I'm a liar. Well, yeah, of course the addict's calling me a liar. But what hurts more is that you believe him. You know that there are drugs involved. You know that there are situations. And yet you are choosing to believe that. And I get that you want to, but let's be honest. And so with my brother, and like specifically, I kind of had to step back and I kind of had to be like, I can't worry about it. I can't change it. Like, cutting off an addict doesn't help unless everybody cuts them off. But what it does help is the person who does the cut off. It's like, I basically had to, like, mourn the loss of my brother because I knew I couldn't do anything to help him until everybody in the family was ready to stand in line and help him. And, like, with my parent, it was like, I have to be able to separate myself emotionally. I can't stop you from doing certain things, but what I can do is the minute they start, I can go away. I can pull away. And you can say I'm isolating myself and my children and that I'm doing it on purpose to punish you. And you can yell 1,000 things and call me a million names. But the reality is I am stepping away because my heart and my soul deserve to be healed and they deserve to get better. And because I have my own addiction that is born of pain and the inability to cope, and I deserve better. And I don't mean better than that person. I mean better than addiction and better than abuse and better than the behavior that I am removing myself from. I love my entire family. They are all welcome. I dream of like beautiful Christmases with my whole family there and everybody having this genuinely nice time where we're not like walking on eggshells, scared of so-and-so or worried about so-and-so. But I also know that that dream will never be a reality as long as I am allowing those things happen. So what I need to face is the fact that like my Christmases might just be me, my wife, and my children, or me and my family, because those are the people who I know care and respect my life. And the moment that a family member falls into that, they're welcome in. You are not cut off, but the behavior is. And I hope that that makes some kind of sense. But anyway, like as I've been doing that, it's been a very lonely road. It's been a very lonely, hard road. And I do believe that it has played into how sick I have been over the last couple of years. We all know that I know the pain in my body is a real pain. The erythema nodosum is a real medical condition. The rheumatoid arthritis, I know all of that, but we also know that our stress levels and our emotional well-being can feed directly into pain, chronic pain. And I know that those things have existed and that has helped me lose my sobriety when it comes to food addiction. So basically, I am just putting myself back together and reminding myself of the standards. And all of this comes because my brother, my baby brother, is back in rehab. He has been back in rehab for almost 3 weeks, and he will be leaving rehab this week. So this weekend, I went with my mom. I was horrified. A year ago, he went to rehab, and I repeatedly asked if the family could go. I repeatedly asked if there was supposed to be family involvement, and I was told no. And then after he got out, I was told that they were too upset, and they didn't feel like they should have to do work. So they purposely skipped family weekends to, like, punish him, and I was pissed. I was so mad and so heartbroken, and I was angry. And so this time I was very verbal about wanting to be involved and wanting to go. And so that's what this weekend was. This weekend was a very long weekend. I drove a very long way. I spent a lot of time in a stupid counseling session so that I could see my brother. I saw my brother. I got to say the things I wanted to say. I think he knows that I love him. I think he knows that I want what's best for him. I think he hears a voice in all of the den of, do this, do that, do this, do that. And you got my parents who think that by manipulating him into certain behaviors and into certain situations, he's going to get better. When I'm like, you have to let him go. You have to let him go. Like, if he's gonna crash and burn, he has to burn. So far, his whole life, all he's done is crash, and y'all run in and y'all fix everything, and you do as much as you can, and yes, you punish him by letting him know it's bad, and now I'm gonna keep you on lockdown and all this other stuff, but he's still able to do what he wants. So you have to let him crash and burn, because the burn is when you learn that flames are hot and you don't want to get burned again. Bang. And that's the learning part he needs. And I was sitting in that, and I was hoping that other things were sinking in, but for me, they definitely were. For me, I was definitely connecting dots, and I was like, you know what? I have to take my sobriety serious again, because I'm starting to slip. It's a very slippery slope, and there's the one behavior that I have not done, like it's the fast food hamburgers and sandwiches that I cut off in 2010, and I have not gone back to, and it's been the only thread of sobriety. And what I realized was I was letting that encourage me to a point of being like, see, I am still kind of sober. But the reality is that I would consider that like the mainline drug, and that all the backup drugs have been being used. Like, all the backup foods are like in active play, and I'm not sober. And I told you guys that a long time ago, but I have been trying. And so this month I am getting sober, and I have to take a real look at everything and figure out what that's going to mean. And I will be talking to you guys about it. But I was like, you know what? I set those boundaries 3 years ago, and they were so hard and so emotional to keep going that I slowly let them kind of fade. And I don't like where I'm at with the relationships that I have, and I don't like where I'm at with the relationship with food that I have and my addiction. So I am committing to sobriety and going to take that very seriously, but also I'm committing to my standards and to my boundaries, and I think, more ready for the isolation. I have a lot of friends who I love dearly. I have my wife, I have my children, I have my bubble, I have my sister, and if that's all I get, I still have more than many, many people. So I'm going to stop allowing other things to creep in just because I want this other picture. Because really, I don't want that picture if it's a pretty picture hiding something ugly. And I would rather have a different picture that isn't hiding anything. That's just how I feel. And that's what this weekend was. And I feel like I'm going to cry. I'm not going to cry here. I'm not going to cry on camera. Whenever I'm like, no, I'm just not going to cry on camera. But I do feel like I am in a new space. And I knew coming into this year that things were starting to get a little different. And I just feel like it's time to look back at it. I had over a year of sobriety, and I want that back. And I will, like today, I am drinking coffee. I have a plan, but I don't know what I'm going to define sobriety as. Last time it was just strictly fast food, but this time I don't know. So I can't tell you if today's going to count as sober or not. I'm hoping to live it as truly foods, like, as far as my addiction sobriety goes. And I'm going to move forward, and I will let you guys know my plan every step of the way and how it works for me. But the sharing process comes with like, hey, no judgment. It's okay to disagree with me. If you want to have a conversation or a discussion about it, let's just be respectful, and we'll all just do what makes us healthy and happy and the best us we could be, and hopefully we'll support each other during that whole process. But anyway, so that's where I was at this weekend. That's what I've been going through, and that is the last couple of years. And I think that as I move forward, when things come into play, instead of saying that's not my story, I'm going to just talk to you guys about it. And so we will have a much more open dialogue and hopefully find some sort of healing in it.